It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story. Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu rejects a new ceasefire proposal and orders the Al Jazeera news network off air as hopes fade for a breakthrough. Rishi Sunak survives the plotters and urges his MPs to come together as he resists calls for a general election.
I think it's absolutely overdue.
I don't think he can carry on now. Just get it done. Just call it and get it done.
A vigil is held for schoolboy Daniel Angerim, just metres away from the scene of his death. Two little girls, 5,000 miles apart, and the rare genetic disorder which for one of them could mean imminent death. Plus...
She's the only one who's responding.
The only one close, sir. Says they can be here in 4 hours.
4 hours?
A mesmerising actor, tributes to Bernard Hill, best known for his role as the captain of the Titanic, who's died aged 79. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30. Good evening. The mood music from the Middle East had been positive before today, but after another round of ceasefire talks, the Israeli Prime Minister rejected the central proposal from Hamas outright. There would be no complete withdrawal from Gaza, Benjamin Netanyahu said, no end to the war. Hamas, in turn, accused Israel of sabotaging attempts at mediation as it claimed responsibility for an attack near the Kerem Shalom crossing, which killed 3 Israeli soldiers. Mr. Netanyahu also had strong words for the news network Al Jazeera, which was raided today and taken off air. Sky's international correspondent John Sparks has tonight's first report.
Amongst the rubble on the Gaza Strip, amid the hunger and despair, there was still room for hope. Hope of a truce as negotiators entered a second day of talks in Egypt. Hamas and the Israeli government suggested that a limited ceasefire and the release of some Israeli hostages were achievable aims. Yet any optimism previously expressed soon evaporated. Speaking for the first time about these talks, the Israeli Prime Minister said their opponents' expectations were unacceptable.
While Israel showed willingness, Hamas remained entrenched in its extreme positions, and on top of it, their demand that we withdraw all our forces from the Strip, end the war, and leave Hamas intact. The State of Israel cannot accept this.
For many thousands of Israelis, the unacceptable thing here is their Prime Minister. They think he's got his priorities wrong. Stalling on a deal to get back the hostages as he sets about eliminating Hamas.
Basically, the Israeli people are hostages to the right-wing government, and the people of Gaza are hostages to the Hamas, and basically there has to be a way to overcome that.
A great coalition now seeks the removal of Netanyahu, who faces pressure at home and abroad. The head of the World Food Programme says parts of Gaza are experiencing full-blown famine. It's not an official declaration, but the strongest statement of its kind. Israel failing in its duty to facilitate sufficient humanitarian aid.
There is famine, full-blown famine in the north, and it's moving its way south. And so with what we're asking for and what we've continually asked for is a ceasefire and the ability to have unfettered access, to get in safe and unfettered access.
Israel is fighting this war on multiple fronts, including the battle for public opinion, and it's now taken on one of its fiercest critics in the international media. With the Al Jazeera network described as a threat to national security, the Israeli police have conducted a raid on its premises in Jerusalem, and their networks have been taken off air. Benjamin Netanyahu called it the mouthpiece of Hamas. But without a deal, without any sort of resolution to this crisis, his critics and their criticism will only grow. John Sparks, Sky News in Jerusalem.
Wake up and smell the coffee. The message to the Prime Minister today from the right of his party after a bruising local election defeat. Rishi Sunak described the results as bitterly disappointing and urged his MPs to come together to take on Labour. Sky's chief political correspondent John Craig reports.
A by-election triumph.
You've made history here in Blackpool.
A Labour mayor in the East Midlands.
A really important victory.
And to complete his victory lap, a surprise win in the West Midlands mayoral race.
What a way to end the local elections.
The Tories' only success was poster boy Ben Houchen holding on in Tees Valley. Along with heavy losses in town halls throughout England, the Conservatives took a drubbing. Ministers admitted the results were bad, but claimed there's still everything to fight for.
Look, these were disappointing results, but the point is what they demonstrate from that scenario is that Labour's not on course for that majority. Keir Starmer hasn't sealed the deal with the public, so that means there's a fight to be had. The Prime Minister's up for that fight.
But Suella Braverman urged Mr Sunak to change course, or this weekend's earthquake would look like a tremor at the general election. A veteran Tory MP says voters are angry with the party, but dumping Mr Sunak is not the answer.
I'm not proposing a new leader. We've had several goes at doing that. I think we've got to get on urgently and serve the needs of the public.
And a Boris Johnson cheerleader is calling for a recall for the former PM.
He's staring down the barrel of a gun, isn't he? As every Conservative is. And I think that if every Conservative, whether it's One Nation, whether it's the Thatcherite Conservatives like myself, we've got to wake up and smell the coffee. We've got to actually start delivering true Conservative values. So I think he's got to listen. Come on, bring Boris back on the front line as well, Prime Minister.
Tory morale won't be helped when MPs return here after the bank holiday, and yet another Labour by-election winner, the new Blackpool South MP Chris Webb, takes his seat in the Commons. But Labour's campaign chief says this doesn't feel like the Blair landslide in 1997.
It's a different time. We've got different people, different politics. Labour's been on a losing streak for a long time. These results should give Labour belief and confidence. Yes, we've got more work to do.
Labour requires a record-breaking swing to win the general election, but this weekend's results have put the party a step closer. John Craig, Sky News.
Well, you heard the message from politicians there. It was a slightly different tone from voters in the West Midlands today. After a dramatic last-minute recount, Conservative Mayor Andy Street was deposed, losing by just 1,500 seats. His Labour successor said his party was ready for a general election. So do people in Birmingham agree? Becky Johnson has been finding out.
The race for West Midlands Mayor couldn't have been closer. A big, symbolic victory for Labour, won by the smallest of margins. The morning after the night before, another race underway in Birmingham. Among the runners, Pete from Wolverhampton told me why he voted Labour.
Partly protest against austerity and politically what's happened over the past couple of years. I think the other reason is that time for change.
Do you think it's time for a general election now?
Overdue. I think it's absolutely overdue.
If there's one thing for Rishi Sunak, hear what the people are saying. There's movement on the street. People are ready for a general election. I don't think he can carry on now. Just get it done. Just call it and get it done.
Who did you vote for at the last mayoral election?
Oh, Andy Street.
And who did you vote for this time?
I abstained this time.
So you didn't want to vote Conservative this time, but couldn't quite bring yourself to vote for Labour?
You know, you look at Keir Starmer, what's he going to bring? There's nothing real concrete from him. Rishi Sunak, again, it's a bit of a decline, so it's just who do you vote for?
And despite coming out on top, Labour's position on the war in Gaza cost them some support. Former Labour voter Hassan didn't back them this time.
The way the Labour Party leadership ignored the concerns of many people, progressives, Muslims in particular, and I feel like they punished Labour for that, and hence why the result is so narrow.
But the win here in the West Midlands has spurred Labour on. Andy Street had been Conservative mayor here in the West Midlands for 7 years. He's well known and ran a campaign where he barely mentioned the Tory party. That even he was unable to turn the national tide is undoubtedly a blow to the Conservatives. Despite losing overall, Andy Street won more votes here in Dudley than Labour. This town will be a key battleground in the general election. The former mayor had this warning for those in his party urging a shift to the right.
So the message is clear. Winning from that centre ground is what happens.
Did you vote for Andy Street?
No.
Have you voted for him in the past?
Yes.
John, who lives in the Dudley borough, isn't convinced which way the Tories should go if they're going to win voters like him back.
Moving more towards the right makes the world more divisive, makes our society more divisive, makes people and you polarise politics, and I think that's a dangerous place to be in. But ultimately, there's a lot of Conservative voters who won't vote for the Tories at the moment because they're too centrist.
From voters here, the message to both main parties is it won't be an easy ride to victory in the run-up to the general election. Becky Johnson, Sky News, Birmingham.
Well, our chief political correspondent John Craig joins us now from Downing Street. And John, the Conservatives, as you know, lost 474 councillors and the West Midlands mayoralty. What's the Prime Minister's message to his party and voters tonight?
The Prime Minister has given an interview to The Times in which his message to his party is we've got to come together. It reminds me of when John Major used to say unite or die, and fat lot of good that did him in the 90s. But in his Times interview, he, in line with Sky's own projections of what these results mean, he says these results suggest we're heading for a hung parliament with Labour as the largest party. Keir Starmer propped up in Downing Street by the SNP, Lib Dems and the Greens. A disaster, he says. Country doesn't need more political horse trading, but action. And speaking directly to his party, he says this: I know the last few years have been tough and I understand why people are frustrated. He goes on to talk about losing good councillors and a mayor as fantastic as Andy Street. Bitterly disappointing, he says. Then he says, but I'm determined to show people that we are delivering for them and standing up for our values. He goes on to say there's work to do, more progress to be made. I'm determined we'll come together as a party and show the British people we are delivering for them. Well, come together, that's a plea for unity, but there are plenty of Tory MPs, particularly on the right of the party, who show no signs of heeding that plea for unity at the moment.
Indeed. John, thank you. And our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, and Politico's UK Editor, Jack Blanchard, have been discussing how the political parties will be battling to control the narrative. You can listen to the latest episode of Politics at Jack and Sam's podcast by scanning the QR code on screen now. To East London now, where a vigil was held today to remember 14-year-old Daniel Anjorin, who was killed in a sword attack while walking to school. Residents gathered just metres away from where he died, with one close family friend describing Daniel as quiet and well-behaved. Emma Birchley reports.
I know a lot of you may feel that it's very touching, it's very difficult, it's very unimaginable to accept what has happened.
5 days on from the horror that rocked this quiet corner of London, a community gathered. Hand in hand, they remembered the teenage boy who would not survive the 22 minutes of terror. Somebody to lean on. 14-year-old Daniel Anjorin was on his way to school when he was killed by a man wielding a samurai sword. Harris Manon is best friends with the teenager's big brother. He's known Daniel since he was a young boy.
What was Daniel like?
Like the most sensible, good, like well-behaved, never said a foot wrong. At school, caused no trouble. At home, caused no trouble. Quiet kid. Everyone from the community, even though they didn't know Daniel, they turned up, and that matters. It makes a difference.
In the tributes at the scene, on a teddy bear's kit at the Vigil, references are clear to see of Daniel's love of Arsenal. And during this weekend's clash with Bournemouth, players and fans at the Emirates stopped to remember him. The boy's parents did not attend the gathering in Hainault, but they knew it was happening.
On Saturday, the family spoke in a statement of the devastation of their loss, of how hard it is to process that Daniel will never be coming home, and that not only have they lost an amazing son, but his siblings have lost a precious brother.
Another 4 people were hurt during Tuesday morning's terrifying incident, including 2 police officers who suffered serious injuries. Daniel died at the scene.
It was just the innocence of Daniel that really struck me, and it was just really sad.
The trauma that the community feels is immense. More to the point, though, there's a sense of loss.
I've also got a son that's in year 9, and he's played football with Daniel. And, you know, when that happened that morning, I just say to myself, that could have been my son.
36-year-old Marcus Arduini Monzo faces 7 charges, among them 1 of murder, 2 counts of attempted murder and 2 of grievous bodily harm. He's due to appear at the Old Bailey on Tuesday. What unfolded here has shaken this community and beyond. How a young life could be so unexpectedly and inexplicably cut short, leaving so many to mourn. Emma Birchley, Sky News, Hainault.
John Swinny looks set to become the new SNP leader and First Minister of Scotland after his challenger, Graham McCormick, pulled out of the leadership race tonight. Mr McCormick told Sky News that he'd reached the nomination threshold but was now endorsing Mr Swinny after the pair held talks. In a statement, he said a fresh start for the party's members would be rewarded at the next general election. A 38-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of facilitating illegal immigration to the UK. The man, who claimed to be an Iraqi national, was arrested in Preston as part of an ongoing NCA investigation into small boat crossings from France in December and November last year. A 10-year-old girl has died in a house fire in Bradford in the early hours of this morning. A 37-year-old woman and 3 children, aged between 3 and 11, escaped the property and were taken to hospital for non-life-threatening injuries. Police say the fire isn't being treated as suspicious. Now, we brought you news of the dwindling hopes of a ceasefire in Gaza earlier today. Now to the story of 2 families, thousands of miles apart, yet bound by a rare genetic disorder. Julia lives in a tent in Rafah, in the middle of a war zone. Annabelle in a protective bubble in Washington. The girls are 2 of only 1,000 people worldwide with the illness AHC, which causes recurring paralysis. Here's our US correspondent, Mark Stone.
This is a story about 2 little girls, Julia and Annabelle. It's about 2 families in worlds far apart. It's about a war and a disease which connects them. It's about hope over hopelessness. It's a story about the kindness of strangers. On a street corner in Rafah, Gaza, a tent is home for now for the Abu Zita family. Amjad, Maha, and their 2 daughters, Sham and Julia, who has the rarest of diseases, a genetic disorder called AHC. Just 1,000 people worldwide have been diagnosed with it, and she's living with it in the middle of a war.
She's only 3.5 years. I want her to go out and play, but now she can't move at all.
The Abu Zitas are from the north of Gaza, pushed south by the war, now stuck in a city which could be the next battlefield, and with a daughter whose condition is compounded by just the slightest stress.
I talked to myself saying it's over. I lost my girl. She spent almost 2 months at the same situation. A guy called Simon, he gave us a call, saying he would like to help. His daughter, she has the same situation.
Simon and Nina Frost are Annabelle's parents. 5,000 miles away in America, they are accidental experts in AHC after their little girl was diagnosed with it 4 years ago.
The best description that we've had of AHC is the human time bomb disease. You never know when one of their episodes is going to strike. It could send the child to into intensive care. It could kill them.
And so the Frosts and the Abu Zitas have found each other. Through Facebook, they connected.
And he's asking, is this normal?
And through translated messages, they chat.
you know, we take such care to protect Annabelle from any possible stimulus that might be hard on her. She is vulnerable, and she's in the most protective, comfortable, safe home that, you know, any child could hope for. And Julia's circumstances are just perilous.
Our living condition during the wartime is very difficult. The journey to get her a medicine is full of difficulties. But for me, it's important to get her the medicine rather than to have food for any one of us.
Simon has managed to coordinate with the right people to get the right medication into Gaza. Now the challenge is getting her out to Egypt and then on a medical flight to Abu Dhabi. It's hard, maybe impossible.
She's dying next to me, and I cannot even do anything. The most scary thing in my life is losing my daughter.
There is some chance of an extraction soon. It is not guaranteed, but it is some hope for one little girl. In a place where uncertainty and hopelessness is all around. Mark Stone, Sky News in Washington.
Time now to get all the latest sports news with Jasper.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
The Whitsunday Islands, spectacular every day of the week, on the surface at the very least. The brightest of white sand beaches, the clearest of azure blue seas. The most perfect of places for an F1 driver to relax after a hectic start to the season.
Oscar, great to see you, and what a place. Here we are at the Whitsundays. Impressions?
Yeah, it's very, very nice. I've been here once before when I was a little kid, but it definitely doesn't get old, so it's nice to be back.
Yeah, F1 is a pretty intense world, I guess. When you do get away from it all, do you try and connect with nature?
We go to a lot of cities and a lot of amazing places in Formula One, but yeah, getting outside of the city sometimes and getting into nature is always nice. I think, especially in my home country, in Australia, it's nice to see some more parts of it, definitely.
The Great Barrier Reef, you know, it's an iconic natural wonder of the world. Do young Australians feel protective of it? Because it's not in the best of health right now, as you know.
Yes, correct. I think we are very protective of it, and I think, again, as I've gotten older and come back and trying to see it now, yeah, I think I'm more and more protective of it, and I, you know, want the future generations to be able to see it. So it's very important for all of us.
The Great Barrier Reef is the size of 70 million football pitches, big enough to be seen from space. But to say it's losing its lustre is putting it lightly. Climate change has caused global sea temperatures to rise, and in the last 8 years alone, there have been 5 mass bleaching events. That's where the coral is stressed, its colours fade and turn a deadly white. If the coral suffers, so does everything dependent on it, and reefs support a staggering quarter of all marine life, more species than are found in rainforests. But this is where McLaren want to step in, using F1 innovation for good.
We decided as part of our climate contribution programme to partner with the Great Barrier Reef Foundation because there is such an important need to help restore and preserve damaged ecosystems. We have a lot of engineering expertise, we look at data and analytics, we have a high performance culture, and we're really targeted on what we're trying to achieve, and we do it at speed. And that's really what the world needs in terms of climate solutions.
McLaren care about this issue. They want to represent. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's a great part of McLaren and part of our culture. Definitely is trying to help the world in ways outside of motorsport. Of course, we're a racing team and a Formula One team, and we strive to be successful on the track. But I think we want to leave a mark on the world as well, and not just be a successful Formula One team.
Last year, success took a while to arrive. McLaren had to wait 10 Grand Prix for their first podium at Silverstone. Oscar then won the sprint race in Qatar, the team eventually fourth in the Constructors' Championship. The Reef requires a similar comeback story.
Really dumb question here, but there's no left or right. Right, okay.
This nation, that wide outdoors and the coastal lifestyle and the beach and the ocean, it helped make Oscar. So, you know, in a way, he's giving back and helping her be stronger as well. So I'm really excited.
This is the underwater footage you're probably used to seeing when it comes to destinations like the Reef. The reality, however, is rather different. The punchy, bright hues are gone. The pastel yellows and browns dominate.
I really do believe that with what we've been able to progress in the last 5 years, we can win this battle. This is a battle we can win in climate change. We can help corals live with climate change by restoring them at scale and toughening them up to the warmer water. One of the wonders within the wonders of the Great Barrier Reef, the spawning event, where once a year all the corals get busy and they all release the coral babies, harnessing that and rearing those babies and getting them out where they need to be. So it's giving Mother Nature that extra inch.
It's a Baywatch moment. Come on, mate, you've got better hair than this than I
do. A key characteristic they're looking for in coral is being resilient.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
Now imagine this, 1.6 million people on a beach in Brazil singing and dancing to Madonna. And that's what happened in Brazil when the Queen of Pop chose to make the final concert in her farewell tour free to her fans. Thousands of military personnel were drafted in for the one-off event, as Alice Porter reports.
Are you ready?
Rio's vast Copacabana beach turned into a mega dance floor to welcome the Queen of Pop. And the best bit, it was all free. 1.6 million people attended the concert, which is understood to be the largest ever standalone gig for any artist. People crammed onto the beach to watch Madonna. The bay was filled with boats, with some fans watching the concert over the waves, as Madonna performed her greatest hit for over 2 hours.
When I saw that she was going to be here for free, I totally wanted to be here to see Madonna. I believe it will be one of the last opportunities to see her on form, on stage, singing. There's no way I was going to stay away from her.
Madonna had to run so that today's pop artist could walk. That's why she's important, because she serves as an inspiration for today's pop divas. And that's 40 years ago. It's not 40 days, 40 months, it's 40 years.
It was Madonna's last show of the Celebration Tour, which kicked off in October in London and saw her perform 36 gigs around the world.
In every country, at least one song is known by one person, all the lyrics, someone's got one of her albums somewhere. It's really gone into the folklore of popular music, and that is a very, very elite club. It's all about confessional pieces now, biographical, laying this little crumb for the fans. Madonna was doing that 4 decades ago. Now we're just seeing it everywhere, and that's because of her.
Madonna's tour may have come to an end, but this icon of the music industry doesn't seem to be stopping anytime soon. Alice Porter, Sky News.
He's been described as an incredible talent who blazed a trail across the screen.
Gives a job. Go on, gives it. Go on.
The actor Bernard Hill rose to fame in the 1980s, playing the head-butting Yosser Hughes in the TV series Boys from the Black Stuff.
4 hours.
Thank you, Brian.
And he went on to play major roles like Captain Edward Smith in Titanic and Theoden, King of Rohan in Lord of the Rings. His agent said he died in the early hours of this morning. Well, today he was remembered as a wonderful and mesmerising actor, just one of many tributes to Bernard Hill, who's died aged 79. Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by journalist and author Janelle Aldred and barrister and former government minister Anna Soubry. Amongst the stories we'll be discussing this on the front of the Mirror, their headline, "Our hearts are heavy, the pain is deep, our faith is strong." More on that story and others when we come back.
They've pushed the protesters further back here. There's around 200 or 300 still remaining.
I'm Dan Whitehead and I'm Sky News' West of England correspondent.
This van goes onto the streets of Plymouth 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
These facilities at the moment are a lifesaver. It's all we've got.
From fishing communities to bustling cities, we spend every day reporting from across the region.
I'm going to have nowhere to live for about 3 or 4 months.
They are coming from the epicentre of what is now a global health pandemic. We were seeing and speaking to young women who were selling themselves right on the high street. Before Brexit, these oysters were being exported to the EU, but the trade stopped overnight.
What's your feeling about the future then?
Blake, it'll be finished, I don't know.
Welcome back. You're watching Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has rejected a new ceasefire proposal for Gaza and orders the Al Jazeera news network off air. Rishi Sunak calls for his MPs to unite following the disappointing local election results and resist calls for an early election. A vigil has been held to remember 14-year-old Daniel Anjorin, who was killed in a sword attack while walking to school. You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with journalist and author Janelle Aldred and barrister and former government minister Anna Soubry. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, the FT reports that the Prime Minister has been told by Conservative MPs to show some vision and start salvaging his party after the Tories' disastrous local election results. The Times reports that the PM has issued a warning to his party to unite to take on Labour or face a hung parliament. Only big tax cuts and growth can save the Tories now. That's the front of the Daily Express. The Telegraph says the PM has now shelved plans for a summer election and will be pinning his hopes on the economy and flights leaving for Rwanda. While on the front of The Guardian, the headline reads, Labour sets sights on blue wall seats at next election. Dozens of pro-Gaza activists elected in local elections. That's the claim from the Daily Mail. Moving away from politics, tributes to Daniel Anjorin, killed in a sword attack, lead the Mirror. The headline, our hearts are heavy, the pain is deep, our faith is strong. And the Daily Star says, with temperatures reaching 24 degrees this week, Britain will be hotter than Corfu. Or Corfu, as you see what they did there. A reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by journalist and author Janelle Aldred and barrister and former government minister Anna Soubry. Welcome to you both. So, The Telegraph is telling us that Rishi Sunak has shelved all ideas of a summer election, Anna. No surprises there?
I mean, I wouldn't have been surprised if he'd gone. This is before the results of the last few days. If he had gone in the summer, I just didn't think you could really rule anything out. But you can see now that because of the results, which are showing, even though it's claimed the opposite almost in this report, you can understand that he isn't going to go in the summer. And he is really going to go, as he's going to leave it as long as he possibly can, because he's hoping beyond immeasurable hope that some miracle is going to come along and save him. The thing that really struck me about this was that there is what they call a glimmer of hope was provided by analysis from the University of Oxford, some researchers and no doubt highly academic people looking at them and saying, actually, he's more likely to get a hung parliament. I mean, my take on all of it is that there's this lack of digging into these results. Can I just give you one quick example? In my area, which is the East Midlands, so I live in Leicestershire, not Nottinghamshire, Derbyshire, where Labour won the mayor's election there, this new mayor. If you look at the actual breakdown from the boroughs, which are not coterminous with the parliamentary constituencies, but in Ashfield, which at the moment is Lee Anderson, you look there, Labour won. If you look at Mansfield, Ben Bradley's seat, he was the Tories candidate. Who won there? Labour, convincingly. Bassetlaw, another seat that the Conservatives won. Who won there? Labour, convincingly, in my old seat, Broxton. And so it goes on. And that's the deep dive you need to have, because with a low turnout, this shows you whether or not you've actually got your own vote out. And that's why it's such bad news for Sunak, because the Conservatives couldn't drag out their core votes in the way that Labour could, and some more.
And Janelle, do you think that the local election results and the mayoralty results as well, do you think that they adequately reflect what we could see potentially in a general election? Because people have quite different voting patterns when it's local elections as opposed to a general election.
I think potentially it could be something different, and I listened to that, and I've been saying to a few of my friends for a little while, I was like, I think it could be a hung parliament, because I don't see that massive surge that as these researchers don't see in terms of what they think could happen at the general election. I was quite a bit more mature before I started voting in local elections, because I think I used to think, oh, local elections, what's this got to do with me? But then you get somewhere to live and you start paying council tax and you start going, hang on, I want to have a bit of a say in what's going on. But I definitely think I used to take general elections a lot more seriously because they feel so big and they feel so there and the coverage is much bigger. So I do think that there is a certain turnout that does come out of the general election that maybe doesn't go out for their local elections, because I do think local elections are quite hardcore people who are into the way their areas are run and what they're thinking about. The only thing Sunak does have on his side is time. And I think literally that's why he's probably is going to push it as long as possible, because hoping for a miracle, thinking there could be some growth, thinking there could be some change, something could happen in the run to an election. So I can see why a summer election would be completely shelved now, although I wasn't sure ever.
But, you know, you're absolutely right about local matters, but that's why this is such bad news for Rishi Sunak, because Ben Hoochin, who's the North East Mayor, Conservative re-elected, people were saying, look, we're voting for him, not the party. And equally, I thought last night's results from the West Midlands, that was... Because if there was a Tory, you were... You know, if you're not that way inclined, if there was a really wonderful person, it's Andy Street. Really, he's done a cracking job. And even he couldn't keep that. He couldn't... And that shows...
That was a shock, wasn't it?
That was a shock.
And that shows that people are saying, I'm sorry, I know Andy Street's a good man, very good man. I know he's done a very good job. I'm not voting Conservative. I'm making a point here. And that's why it is devastating for the... That's my view. It's devastating.
I mean, I understand that, because even though the Conservatives lost so heavily, it was great news for Labour in terms of a lot of it was just scattered, so it wasn't entirely amazing. But it wasn't entirely amazing for them. The vote was scattered. The Lib Dems had won 104.
No, the Lib Dems were being very clever. They are concentrating on their target areas, and in those target seats, they did really well. They're underneath the radar, because everybody's talking about Labour and the Conservatives. Lib Dems are doing really well where they need to do well.
We shall see. Janelle, let's turn to The Guardian, and they're saying that Labour are setting their sights on the blue wall seats at the next election.
They're planning on targeting the south of England really heavily. I think Pat McFadden, I saw him today on the Trevor Phillips show, and he was talking quite a good game, and he's saying now it's the case that Labour controls twice as many councils in the south east as the Tories. It's smart. You have to target somewhere and kind of put your, kind of mark your patch of kind of where you want to go and where you want to win. Will they do it? I'm not entirely convinced.
No, they're going for people like me. I know I was a Tory MP.
And who are you?
Who are you?
What I mean is, it's one nation Tories, because I'm not tribal, like most normal people. And they are going for one nation Conservative voters who look at the Tory party, heard the likes of Suella Braverman this morning, and are in despair. That's who they're going for. And they are selling themselves as you can trust them on the economy, decency, competence of people of Keir Starmer.
But do you think that people aren't tribal? Because I think people have become increasingly tribal. So if they've changed sides, I think in this election, would this be the one where they're definitely going to dig in to the side they picked, or are they going to change over?
Because most people, it's only people who are involved in politics who get very tribal about it, and then certain types of people who stick to an ideology, whether it's on the left or the right. That's why we always talk about you win elections in the centre, because that's where most people,
but then
their
some
politics
people on the left are just choosing not to vote at all. So they say they don't want to vote for Keir Starmer, which to me, that says a sense of tribalism, in that I'm not actually going to go, I can't bring myself to vote for the other lot. I just won't vote for these people.
And we see with the example of Andy Street, it's only 1,500 votes, and
not a lot.
Potentially some of those who just didn't vote at all.
Yes, but it's this thing about pulling out your core people. I don't know what the turnout was in the West Midlands. I know what it was in the East Midlands, and obviously it's because it's a new one, so it's not like the Andy Street one over in the West Mids. The turnout was about 25-26%, but it shows, you see, because when you campaign and see when that sort of election, you just want to go for your core vote. And what Labour did, it had no difficulty getting its core vote out, and the Tories really struggled. And that's why Claire Ward, who was the newly elected East Midlands mayor, has done such a terrific job in her campaign.
Do you not think in the mayoral ones it literally does feel like it's either Labour or the Conservatives? In the local elections, not so much in the councils, but in the mayoral elections, it feels like it's either one or the other. So if people are rejecting that, then they're going to go there.
You're right, but that's where you've got an existing mayor. And when you've got something like this, where nobody... I mean, most people don't even know what the East Midlands mayor is. And so that was you getting out your core vote, and Labour absolutely got it out.
Just time to...
Sorry, I didn't deal with the big wall.
around the houses. Just a few seconds, I think we've got left about the hung parliament, really, that issue being drawn on as from Rishi Sunak as a way to bring his party together, because they shouldn't want that to be the result. Janelle?
I mean, I think that's probably his best bet, because I think if he came out and said, I think we can win this thing, I think everyone would probably say, really? So I think him saying...
Well,
the UK
he's kind of still saying that.
I think
they are still saying that.
Well, Rishi Sunak is saying the UK, you know, we could be heading for a hung parliament. I mean, I do think this could actually happen. And I think it could happen because I do think there are a lot of Labour supporters who aren't voting Labour this election. They don't want to vote for Keir Starmer. And so I think if that happens... Yeah, so they won't vote at all. Well, some people won't vote at all. They don't see it like that, though. I don't think,
they should do.
But I don't think people see it in that way. I think they see who they want to vote for and who they don't want to vote for.
But I think you should say, who do you want running our country? And you know, be a grown-up and be sensible about this. Because he doesn't suit my ideology, I'm not voting for Keir Starmer. It's like kind of getting
the thing is, the problem is politicians and politics has made it about the personality, so they're dying by their own way.
But apparently he doesn't have any personality.
That says
he's got the personality of a peanut, which is not true.
And she's to be
We're not going to go into character assassination here. Anna and Janelle, thank you so much for the moment. I'll leave them to discuss in the break. Now, a renaissance of British pubs, why Heineken will be reopening 62 venues that had closed in recent years. We'll be discussing that next. Stay with us.
In the middle of the ocean, and if stuff goes wrong, we have to get ourselves out of it. Plastic was created as this amazing material that would last forever, and we've done that.
Every inch of this ocean has a plastic fragment.
The problem is totally different than what I expected.
I've never seen so much rubbish in the middle of nowhere.
You on shark watch?
We left from Hawaii and we sailed across the middle of the North Pacific Gyre, or what we know as the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, to Vancouver, so 3,000 miles across the Pacific, doing scientific experiments along the way to really find out more about how much is in the ocean, what it's like, the fact that it breaks down into these small fragments that we call microplastics, and to really look at the chemistry of the plastic, the things adhering to it, to ultimately find out how we can solve it. It's all to do with the currents. So we have a huge, great big circulating current in each of our oceans. And in the centre, there's a calm patch. And so that's where all the plastic accumulates. So we had to sail straight on into those really strong winds to be able to get to the centre of the gyre. I think the biggest thing, we often expect to find an island of plastic. But the most surprising thing is that the wind and the waves and the sun break it down into fragments. So this is one of our samples here that we collected, and we actually found 507 pieces, which equates to over 500,000 in 1 square kilometre. The fact that it's this big, and now the estimates are looking at around 171 trillion pieces in our ocean, the idea of trying to go out there into this very challenging environment and clean it up just seems like the most enormous task, and that we really need to work at the source to stop it getting in there in the first place.
And so the documentary is coming out imminently, and you hope that the conclusion of it is eliminating single-use plastics at source?
Yeah, what the documentary really does is it takes people on this journey with us. It's quite an extraordinary place to visit. Not many people have been there. And so it allows you to really see firsthand, you know, what we saw, what the true problem is of plastic.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. Still with me, journalist and author Janelle Aldred and barrister and former government minister Anna Soubry. We're going to take a look at the front page of the Mirror and this desperately shocking and sad story. And this is the killing of Daniel Anjorin in the sword attack. Vigil held today that people attended, and you just got to find out a lot more about this young boy killed in this most awful, gruesome way. Janelle?
Yeah, you know, I think our hearts are heavy, the pain is deep, our faith is strong. I think, you know, for any family losing a child and the ripple effect that puts across a family, a community, across school, across everyone who knew him, and by all accounts, you know, really lovely, sweet, kind, studious young boy. I just think we can't even imagine the pain that's going on over there. There was a vigil today. Apparently his family, you know, weren't there, and I can imagine that they're at home holding on to each other really, really tightly, because that is just something that is just the most unimaginable pain for parents. And, you know, glad to see that the Daily Mirror have paid tribute to him so beautifully.
Yes, and Arsenal did it. They had a minute silence at their game because he was an Arsenal supporter.
Yes, he was. It's funny, isn't it? I'm trying to look through all the other front pages and I don't see this story on the front pages. I have to say...
I think it's the only one.
And I am the only white person here, so perhaps I can say it. If he was a white boy, would this be on the front page of every newspaper? But he's a black boy, and he was killed with a weapon. And I'm just wondering whether or not we you know, really got to have some tough questions in our society, and perhaps amongst our newspapers. Was the assumption that because he was a black boy and there was a weapon, that he was part of some gang or something? And gosh, it turns out he's just like any other 14-year-old, goes to school, works hard. As it happens, his parents are people of faith. And I really do, it really troubles me. And I don't think I've ever felt it so strongly before.
I think it's because it's
I've seen it so blatantly.
It's so very, very blatant. And I think you've seen, you know, on social media, people have talked about this and the comparisons between other headlines when it happens. And, you know, some people might dismiss this as just people complaining or some woke nonsense, but it's not. It matters, because his life matters. And he was a 14-year-old boy who was minding his own
business. But I think what you're describing pertains to
else.
another newspaper, and that headline, which described him as a sword lad, and was a very tiny photo, which has caused a lot of anger, actually.
Yeah. Quite right, too, because he's not a lad, he's a lovely little boy. And just going to school. Just going to school.
And his name should have been used rather than sword
and
lad.
Name him. Sword lad, what does that mean?
That's was quite a disturbing headline.
Quite right.
It's not
it is
this
disturbing.
newspaper.
This is not on the front page of... And well done, the Mirror, for putting it where it should be.
Let's move on. Want to have a look at this story regarding pubs. Anna, you take us into this Heineken...
I think this is really... Actually, this is a great story, this, if it's right. But Heineken is actually planning now to invest a lot of money, £40 million a year, into opening up new pubs. Why do I say that? Because pubs are places that communities traditionally have valued. I mean, I know they sell alcohol, but they have huge benefits also to communities, bring people together, they put on things that communities get involved in and stuff. And I think the figure was, and I know I'll be corrected, but it was something like one pub was closing, if not every day, it was certainly every week. And we're all aware.
I think, yes, after the pandemic, yeah.
No, even before COVID. Even before COVID, that pubs were closing. They seemed to be losing their way and losing their place in our society and in our communities. And it's not just Heineken, but Green King, apparently, they've started to invest in a new brewery, and they're looking at other pub chains too, at opening up pubs. And I think that should be welcomed.
I went to the pub the other day, like a big one, and it was really interesting. It was just packed. And it's been such a long time since I was somewhere with everyone together. And I think what you're saying about the pubs, you know, whether people drink or not, there's an intergenerational aspect to gathering that is great for community. And I think when we don't have things like pubs, you kind of section off into bars, you section off into other places, and then we don't tend to gather. And I think that's quite nice when we can do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
We've got about a minute to talk about phone phobia. I don't think you suffer from it. I know Janelle does, because we were talking about it in the break.
Well, my children suffer from
well,
it.
my children do. They simply don't answer their mobile phones.
So I grew up in the age of when I was 16 when I had my first mobile phone. So up until then we had the landline, you know, mum and dad put a block on it because we were calling our friends and chatting all evening. But you'd have to call and say, hello, Mrs So-and-so, is so-and-so in? Can I talk to them? So I still have that, but there's a lot of young people who I know don't pick up the phone. I have my phone on Do Not Disturb all the time. You have to ring me twice just to get through and I still scream. I know, sorry.
No, nobody rings me. But,
oh, Anna.
No. But in all seriousness, now I understand why my daughters are just under 34, the two of them, and
they're scared. There's not a problem. They're scared.
They're screening. They're just screening the calls. Oh, that means they don't want to talk to you. Janelle and Anna, thank you so much for taking us through the papers. We'll see you both in the 11. See you then.